Let's go ahead and bring this meeting to order, a joint meeting of the City Council of the City of Placerville and the El Dorado County Fire. And if we can get a, let's see, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Borelli?
Here.
Councilmember No?
Here.
Councilmember Saragosa? Vice Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Mayor Thomas?
Here.
Okay, if we can get a roll call for the fire district.
Director Swarbrick?
Here.
Director Kaiserman?
Here.
Director Gilchrist?
Here.
Director Harper?
Here.
And Director Brenton is absent. Mr. Chairman, we've established a quorum.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. If you would all rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Is this the first, I think this is the first joint meeting of El Dorado County Fire and the City of Placerville that I'm aware of.
Hopefully many more to come.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So, we really didn't talk this through much on how we're gonna do this, but I'll go ahead and get it rolling here and we get to the presentation. So announcements and presentations to the public. We're gonna kick this off with a presentation by Dewberry Architects Incorporated, project presentation showing current buildings and proposed projects.
Yeah, just members of the board and city council, just want to introduce, our police chief, Joe Wren, first. We'll kick this off, and then, fire chief, and then our city engineer, Rebecca Neves. And, I believe we also, Rebecca, have somebody from Newberry online, right, or that will be here? He's on his way, okay. So,
I'll talk slow.
We'll be good. Joe will talk slow. So anyway, we'll go ahead and kick this off. Let me go, start the presentation, and, we'll turn it over to Joe.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Mayor, Director, Board, and Council. We've got a presentation that's going to pop up here in a second. Cleve covered the batting order. I'm going to kick this thing off, and then we're going to pass it off to Chief Cordero, and then from there it'll be passed off to our city engineer, Rebecca Neves, who I believe will also be working with a representative from Dewberry to give more of the technical aspect of what the project entails. Could everybody on Zoom hear me okay?
Is there any public on, or is that?
Actually, the city is running the link today.
Okay.
I don't have access.
Perfect. You can advance the slide. This is why we're here today. It's awesome. It's awesome to actually be present for a meeting, and a meeting of this magnitude makes it just that much more better. Again, I'm Joe Wren. I'm honored to be the police chief here in the city of Placerville. Following me in the presentation will be our fire chief, Tim Cordero, Rebecca Neves, the engineer. We're going to give a brief overview of our current facilities. We're also going to talk about some of our operational challenges, and then Rebecca will talk about the path forward from here. We can actually go one more. That's our current police facility located at 730 Main Street in the city of Placerville. Minus all the ivy out front, we did upgrade and put rock out there. Okay, so the public safety building concept is not new to Placerville. In 1975, the city began a project to move the police department and fire departments out of their facilities and into a combined building at 730 Main Street. This project was designed to bring both the fire and police departments into a facility at one location. A firm was selected, Hoywood, Knopp, and Ward. They presented the plans of the project on March 1st, 1976. The project was approved for an 8,600 square foot building. Just kind of a side note, if you look at our facility and you take a look at what's built up on the county site off of Fair Lane. It's the same contractor, so they're the same building. So if you've been inside there, it's gonna be familiar what you see inside the police department. Next slide. So in November 1978, the police and fire departments moved into the Placerville Safety Building. And speaking to past members of the police and fire departments, at the time they moved in, it was already too small for operational purposes. Because of the limited size, the fire chief had to remain at 3034 Sacramento Street until a revision could be made to the building. Next slide. Although they were under one roof, they had separate entrances and nothing linked the buildings on the interior, so it was built much like, go back one, please.
Back one more.
So it's built much like a duplex, although it shared a roof, there was nothing on the interior that linked both of the facilities together. As you can see from the front, it had no windows, there was just a door. It was a very governmental looking building. In the early 1980s, the fire department wanted to relocate their chief to the safety building, and to accommodate this, a doorway was cut from the fire bay into the main portion of the police department. An office was built in what was the training room at the police department for the fire chief. Additional temporary cubicles were built in the fire bay, and I highlighted temporary. However, those cubicles still remain today. They've been repurposed for storage. In 1985, fire realized the lack of space, and there were some other health and safety issues at the current facility. They ended up moving back to the what's known as Station 25 on Sacramento Street. Next slide. So in reviewing the original plans, the building was not set up for future staffing, growth, or expansion. When the police department moved in, space was tight at that time, but it was workable. The size of the department was 26 full-time employees, and it served a population of just under 7,000. To put that in perspective, now we have 35 employees, and that's not including volunteers and our cadet programs, and we serve a daytime population of about 25,000. So we're shoving 35 plus employees in an 8,600 square foot building. That doesn't include, the workspace does not include the fire bays, which are still used to house fire apparatus. Next slide. So now we get into the doom and gloom of the police department and what our current situation is. So the picture on the left is our break room. It's approximately 8 foot by 6 feet, can only seat 4 people maximum. This close proximity became a significant issue when COVID was at its height. We had issues at the police department due to its size and separating personnel, and we had to close off areas within the PD. So this took a smaller facility and made it just that much smaller. During extended shifts due to crisis matters, examples would be, unfortunately, large-scale fires or PS events or any other critical incident that required officers and professional staff to remain at the facility for extended periods of time. We became aware that we had no room to accommodate or to support staff that had to be at that facility longer than an 8-hour shift. We currently work patrols in 12-hour shifts, so we just don't. We had no room to support our staff. One on the right is our locker room. The male locker rooms are too small to store the equipment the officers are required to carry with them. They lack electrical outlets for securely charging electronic devices. There are no racks for drying wet clothing. And just on a side note, the station was built for 26 employees. Having 35, we ran out of locker space a long time ago. So that's actually a clean locker room. Normally, you would see stuff stacked on the ground, stacked underneath the bench, and also stacked on top of the lockers. Next slide. Even in kind of a more sad scenario, this is our female locker space. When the department was originally designed in 1975, they didn't anticipate having the number of female employees that we currently enjoy today. The female locker room is actually a bathroom that's been converted into their locker space. It's an approximate 5-by-5 room with 4 lockers, and just kind of a sad statement to this scenario. jokingly, one of my female officers requested that we don't hire any other female employees because they don't have the space to put them. Next slide. Picture on the left is our lobby. Our lobby is small. Public is greeted through a ballistic glass window. It's unlikely that the ballistic capabilities of the glass still have their ballistic capabilities due to the age in which it was installed. There's a track here. Also, there's no space to interview people that come into the lobby. So if we wanted to actually conduct an interview with a reporting party, witness, or victim, we would actually have to find a space within the police department to do that, or take them outside and conduct our business out there for privacy purposes. The picture on the right is our current evidence storage. Those are lockable wooden cubbies, and as you can see, there's only a handful of them. We oftentimes run out of space for storing our evidence items. In the event we investigate a case or respond to an incident that requires large amounts of evidence to be collected and stored, we have to call our evidence personnel in to help open the larger facilities so evidence can be immediately packed, processed, and then placed in long-term storage. Next slide. So this is typical of our office space. So the one on the left is our current sergeant's office. It's approximately 88 square feet. To put that into perspective, a standard small office today for one person is 150 square feet. We currently have 2 workspace stations in there, and there are 4 sergeants assigned to that office. Again, on the right, same size, 88 square feet. We currently have 3 people working in there at one time. Next slide. Again, evidence processing. So the undersized and confining space provided in the evidence processing area makes the handling of evidence by 2 or more officers simultaneously a challenge. It's also an issue because that's located within the heart of our building. If we had to process any items that would be considered hazardous, an example would be processing fentanyl. We brought it in now into the interior of our department and are processing it for evidence purposes. Next slide. IT and technology. So when the building was designed and built in 1975, 78, we didn't have what we currently have now with our technological demands. All of our, the one on the left is our current power and technology room. It's to capacity. We can't continue to expand on that. So what needed to happen when additional technology was brought into the department, on the right is an example of that technology with new server racks and radio racks. You could advance the slide. We had to place that into a current investigations office that's already shared by 3 officers. So there is no privacy and there's confidentiality concerns with technicians from outside of our organization going in to service that equipment. We have to actually monitor them the entire time they're in there because of the confidential nature of some of the investigations that are handled by our investigation team. Next slide. So this topic is recurring for the city of Placerville, specifically the police department in 2002. Needs assessment and master plan document was prepared for the remodel of 730 Main Street. This project did not proceed. Again, in 2014, it was brought up and an updated needs assessment and master plan document was prepared. And again, it met with the same results. The project did not proceed. In both the 2002 and 2014 studies, the consultant had reached the same conclusion. The current status of our police facility was insufficient for departmental operational use, as well as the community's needs. Next slide. In 2020, the El Dorado County Grand Jury conducted an inspection of our facility. Now, this isn't new. They do this every year to take a look at our current operation and ensure that we're meeting legal and ethical standards as a policing agency. that inspection prompted an actual, case for the grand jury to, investigate our current facility. The title of it, was kind of shocking, but not surprising. It's a Placerville City Police Facility. The citizens deserve better. So in that grand jury report, the grand jury stated the facility is of older design, having a cramped interior with narrow hallways, noticeable lack of natural light, restricted workspaces, and a lack of adequate storage. Usage to overcapacity leaves no space for future expansion. And while we've done everything we can do to make the building safe, welcoming, and efficient, the fact remains that it's outlived its service life. And unless there's either a major upgrade to it, or we proceed forward with the design and development of public safety building, we're kind of at a crisis need at this point. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Chief Cordero. We'll cover his slides.
Thank you, Chief. Move up to the front here. There's a couple of things on the slides I want to go point out. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and City Council, Mr. Chairman, Board of Directors. Okay. So I'd like to give just a brief overview of the City of Placerville Fire Department as well as the El Dorado County Fire District, giving a historical timeline and some perspective to Station 25. The El Dorado County Fire Protection District was established back in May of 1991. It was a consolidation of the following fire departments: the Pollock Pines Communal Fire Department, Pleasant Valley Fire District, the City of Placerville Fire Department, the Placerville Fire District, and Shingle Springs Fire District. Future years, shortly thereafter, Columbus and Northside joined our district. Our fire district is governed by a 5-member elected board of directors, and we cover 281 square miles with 5 engine companies. We also have a contract with the El Dorado County Emergency Medical Services, commonly known as the JPA, where we operate as a fire district for medic units. Both Engine 25 and Medic 25 that serve the city of Placerville have the highest call volume of all units in the county. I want to give a little slide presentation on the historical perspective with the Placerville Fire Department fire companies that started serving in the city of Placerville. The first fire company that we're aware of took place and formed on June 23rd, 1853. And that was the Neptune Hose Company number 1. In the 1850s, there were several additional companies that were established. Probably most commonly known is the Confidence Engine Company that was formed in June of 1857. And then you can see on through the early 1900s, there were additional companies that were formed to serve the city. And I think that perspective is valuable because as we look to maybe get a new station, a new facility, we also need to recognize the history of the city of Placerville. This photo, and I apologize for the quality of it, we believe it's probably from the early 60s. The engine on the right is 1959 American LaFrance. That unit is still actually in service as a parade rig. If you've been to the Placerville Christmas parade and Santa Claus has been delivered to the tree lighting ceremony multiple times with that engine. What I want to try to point out to you, if you look here, you can kind of see the street. This is Sacramento Street as long as the sidewalk. Take note of those spacings for some future slides. Also, the space around the apparatus as they sit in front of the engine base. As we move forward on a couple of these slides, you're going to see some vast differences with today's modern fire service. Currently today, Station 25, Engine 25 is 3 staff, 3 person per day on that engine. The medic unit is 2 staffing, there's 2 people a day assigned to that medic unit. We also have the duty chief that's assigned to Station 25 for a total of 6 people. Now, if you look, in relation to that last picture, the ambulance, just the size of it to get into the station and where it sits in relation to Sacramento Street, as well as the command vehicle. And Engine 25, I can tell you, is not pulled all the way out. It's still partially inside the apparatus there. The photo on the left, while it's Captain Nick Rose and firefighter Doug Lyons, a couple of friendly-looking guys, what I really want you to take note of is Engine 25's front wheel. This engine, every day when it's pulled out, when the crews do their morning checks, when they have to do any type of training or maintenance on the vehicle, That front wheel is sitting right on the sidewalk, and you can see how the front of the cab protrudes out into Main Street, or Sacramento Street, excuse me. That's the normal location for that, to get that engine all the way out so the crews can do what they need to do. The photo on the right, we tried to kind of replicate the previous photo from the sixties. As you can see in this photo, engine 25 is clear of the sidewalk. You know, they're not protruding out in the street. However, the rear wheels are actually still inside the station. And you can make out the spacing around the engine where it's a tight fit to get into that bay. And, you know, we do what we can to try to keep our apparatus as small and as compact as we can. However, with the demands on the fire service, you know, the increased, you know, responsibilities with auto extrication, swift water, rope rescue, all of those things for our crews to pull that off, it takes equipment. And so all that equipment gets stuffed onto these engines, and they continue to get larger and larger. The other thing that we deal with on the mechanical side is with all the emission controls that are in place. That's why those cabs have gotten larger and more expansive. It's just because they have to accommodate all those new emission controls. So that's the challenge that we're facing with this apparatus. The guys frequently, you know, make comments about, you know, when are we gonna start towing a trailer behind the engine, because there's just so much equipment that they have to carry to do their duties now. As we move inside Station 25, you know, I'd like to tell you that, you know, we're better off than PD, but we feel your pain, brother. It's the same. So the photo on the left is looking into our captain's office. And like I said earlier, we have 6 people that are on duty every day at the station. The captain's office has 3 chairs that will fit into that room, somewhat fit into that room. Every morning when the captain brings the crew in to lay out what they're gonna do for the day, you know, somebody's standing at the doorway because there's just not enough room. And if you look through the back here, you can see the captain's dorm. The captain has his own dorm. He doesn't have to sleep in the dorm room with the rest of the crews. Sounds inviting, sounds like a good scenario. But that dorm room for the captains, that was originally a storage closet. And fortunately for us, a twin-size bed fits inside that storage closet. So while the captain has his own dorm, it's not really what you think it is. The photo on the right is the dorm room for the crews. There's 5 beds that are in there. At some point in time, we added pony walls, dividers between the beds to provide a little bit of spacing and privacy for the crews. But as you can see, it's really tight, and when the beds are in there, there's literally about 2 feet from the bed to the next wall. So there's no space for lockers, there's no space for end tables, anything like that. And there are a few lockers you can see here that are also located in there, but much like with the scenario that PD has, the rest of the lockers are scattered throughout the station where you can find space. So if you're fortunate enough to grab one of those lockers that is in the dorm room, your personal belongings, your bedding and whatnot is gonna be located in the dorm room. If you're not one of those top 4 or 5 people, you're gonna be running around the station to get your equipment, your bedding and personal belongings. And just a little bit of perspective on the firefighters, you know, our crews work at 48.96, which means when they come on, they work 48 hours and then they're off for 4 days. Frequently they work overtime, which would be 3-4 days in a row. So when they come to work, you know, they're packing for a mini vacation, if you will. They've got to bring clothes and all their necessities for the next 2, 3, 4 days. So not having that ample space in the dorm rooms really, you know, creates a challenge for our personnel. Whoa. The photo on the left, that's our workout room. It's our day room. It also serves as a bedroom. The crews, they have their TV in there, so in the evenings, if they want to, you know, kick back and relax a little bit and or do some training or whatnot, they have that room that's available. Unfortunately, if you want to work out, you're working out in the TV room as well. And then you can just make out behind that recliner, there's a bed against the wall there. And we have 6 beds for the stations for the crews right now. Medic 25, because of its call volume, is a very popular medic unit for paramedic students who are getting their field internships completed, to come in and do ride-alongs and get that completed based on the call volume. So anytime we have a ride-along or a paramedic student that comes in, they sleep in the day room. And that's just because there's no other place for them to go. As we look at the photo on the right, that's just looking down the hallway. And when we brought Medic 25 online in 1992, we had to create a lot more cabinetry and spacing for the EMS supplies that unit needs to operate. So all those cabinets along there were kind of just stuffed in. There's more down in the corner. There's closets throughout the station that you'll find EMS supplies stuffed into. And those are all supplies that the crews need to have that ambulance run 10 to 12 calls a day and keep it equipped. Now's where things get a little bit more interesting with our crews. Photo on the left is our kitchen facility. It's looking in the kitchen, which is a commercial grade kitchen, but it's very small for the number of people that we have. And if you look down the hallway here, you go into the dining room, there's another locker room with a shower, and at the very end is a restroom. So from the perspective of that photo, if you were to look immediately to your right, you would end up going into the bunk room or the dorm room for the crews. During the night or during the day, if somebody needs to get up and use the facilities, they get up out of their bed, they walk through the hallway, they have to come through the kitchen, go through the dining room, through a locker room to get to the restroom. So it's really the layout is for, the station was really never designed to do what it's doing today. If you're standing there looking at the photo on the left and you turn around 180 degrees, you'll look at, this is our refrigerator room, used to be a storage room to help store some of the materials and things that the station needed. With the increase of personnel, that's now the refrigerator room. There's 3 refrigerators to accommodate the number of personnel we have on duty. And then it goes into the back, which is our laundry room, cleanup room, which is open to the kitchen area, and then the day room's off the side of that. In the laundry room, we have a standard, household washer dryer for the things that the crews need to clean. This machine in the corner here, that's called an extractor, and that's used for cleaning our turnouts and the crew safety gear. Anytime you have a fire or a call where their equipment becomes contaminated with carcinogens, chemicals, et cetera, this is a specialized piece of equipment that does the cleaning of that equipment. To get to that equipment, the crews have 2 choices. Number one, they can, from the apparatus bays, they can go out into the parking lot next door, walk around the back of the building, come in the back door, and clean their equipment inside the station. The other option they have is just walk down the hallway, go through the kitchen, through the refrigerator room, to get to that machine, to clean their gear, which is contaminated. So it's really a bad scenario. As we look out in the apparatus space, this photo on the left, that's our hose rack. There's, you can see the ladder there where the crews can go up, they hang their hose to dry after any fire. The hose rack is stored here. And then there's a doorway right here, and that doorway goes into the dorm room. The dorm room is attached to the apparatus bay. The apparatus bay is with the equipment going in and out, the diesels, engines. It's a perfect conduit for those carcinogens and exhaust fumes to go into their sleeping areas. We also, you can see right here where this photo was taken just a couple of days ago. The crews have just been up on a swiftwater rescue up by the Civic House, and they came back. They had to hang their PPE, their life preservers, dry suits, wetsuits, and all that equipment to dry. So access in and out of that room is very limited and very cumbersome. The photo in the middle shows the bathroom, the second bathroom and shower that the station has. As you can see, it's in the apparatus bay. That's the hood of Medic 25 in front of it. So again, with 6 people on duty every day and only 1 restroom and 1 shower, if you don't snag the one in the back, you have to go out in the engine bays to take a shower, because that's the only other facility that we have. The photo on the right is the firefighter workstation. It accommodates 1 workstation, 1 computer. The captain has his workstation. The 4 firefighters have to share that workstation. As I noted earlier, Medic 25 is the busiest medic unit in the county, as well as the engine. So the report writing and things that those crews have to do is tremendous. And there's 1 workstation. And behind these panels is all the electrical. So there's not an opportunity to even create another workstation within that small space as it is, because there's just no space. Just a bit of an overview on the fire station and the fire district. Station 25 was originally built in the early 1950s as a volunteer fire station for the city of Placerville. The living facilities such as dorm showers were not part of the original station design. During the early 80s, the station housed what was engine 7870. It's now engine 25, and that was a 2-person model on the staffing. Over the years, interior remodels have been provided to add an additional shower, to add some sleeping quarters and other accommodations. As I noted earlier, in 1992, we added Medic 25 to that facility, which put even greater demands on the facility that was already overtaxed. Current daily staffing is 6 personnel, which exceeds the capacity of that station. And that station does not meet current industry standards as far as the clean station concept and the living arrangements for our personnel. As you saw in the photos earlier, the housing of modern fire apparatus and equipment necessary for our crews to do their jobs is not adequate. You know, we have to have, you know, you've seen it if you've driven by in the mornings when the engine is actually out in the roadway with cones, just so they can do their daily checks. And the sidewalk is blocked off. And then just to recap, our engine and Medic 25, I mentioned it was busy. 25 in 2020 ran 3,061 calls, and Medic 25 ran 3,022 calls. And the facility is, you know, as we've kind of just beat that drum, it's overtaxed, it's too small, it's not adequate for the needs. Our crews are running a lot of calls at that station, and we're pretty excited about the opportunity to take a look at getting a new facility, giving them the space, the room, and the tools that they need to further serve the city of Placerville. With that, I will turn it over to
Can't figure out who's worse off.
Flip a coin.
Right?
Thank you, Chief Wren and Chief Cordero, for your excellent presentation this morning, and also for daylighting the challenges of your day-to-day operations. And as a member of the public as well, I'd like to just say heartfelt thank you for everything you guys do every single day, to you and your staff. Good morning, Board and City Council. Good to see you all on this beautiful Wednesday morning. The Placerville Police Department did a great job soliciting for proposals to conduct a needs assessment for the public safety building. The RFP solicitation generated 7 responses to the project, and a thorough evaluation was conducted by the selection team, which consisted of Chief Wren, Chief Cordero, and myself. At the conclusion of the evaluation by the committee, Dewberry Architects was selected as the firm. Dewberry Architects was informed on March 10th, and that they have been selected to continue in this process. I'd also like to take this moment to introduce our project manager with Dewberry, Will Oren, who is here and available to answer any questions should they come up. Also, as a side note, I know you guys all enjoyed the presentations by the chief, but I really wanted to say that having the privilege of being on the panel, what it actually did was it afforded me an unveiled insight into what our men and women in blue and red deal with on a daily basis. And both departments are humble in spirit and not demanding and they're not complainers. They deal with this every single day. And both chiefs did a great job of stating just the facts. And you'll notice that they never really complained either. That's because along with their staff, they are not the complainers. They show up, they give their all every day, and they do it every day. After touring these facilities and hearing the operational challenges along the way, I've also come to realize that they are silently suffering. And so we, as general members of the public, will never fully know what it's like to walk a mile in their shoes. And with your help, we can take these next steps to creating a facility that supports their operations and, most importantly, supports the great services they provide to our community. A couple of little things I want to daylight. You know, a standard building is typically used, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, 365, not 365 days a year, but, throughout the year. And so both of these facilities being 50 plus years old, for a standard building, that would equate to 104,000 working hours. And that's normal service. So I really want to daylight the fact that these facilities being used 24 hours a day for 50 plus years is 438,000 working hours. So that's 4 times the normal use of a facility. And not only are they used 4 times the normal use of a facility, they also are very well maintained. If you go in there, the gentlemen and the ladies that take care of those facilities, it's very well maintained, it's very clean, it's very tidy. So they take good care of what they have. Next slide. So even with that process, we also wanted to daylight what our next steps are and how we move forward. So now that we know where we've been, how we got there, and what we've done since, we can look ahead to our path forward. Our first step has been identifying what we need for a joint facility, given the deficiencies we've discussed here this morning. That includes development of a phase 1 task of the deficiency assessment and needs analysis. It also includes an evaluation of both sites. Once that's complete, we can report back the findings to the board and council along with recommendations. Phase 2 includes critical tasks. grant funding, and community outreach. Now that we will know where we're deficient and what we need, we can then seek out the funding we need to move this effort forward from concept to construction. Phase 3. Phase 3 is actually the initial development of that concept. It includes schematic design, conceptual site plans, floor plans, and exterior elevations. It's this initial effort that will be paramount to support any kind of funding application or grant program we submit. In order for us to move forward on grant funding, one thing that plays really well with grant funding is showing an agency has a level of commitment to the project. And this is us showing our good faith effort and showing our level of commitment to the project to whoever we receive grant funding from. That is really critical, and it shows a vested interest. The other part of it too is in developing the schematic design and the conceptual site plans, the conceptual floor plans, and the conceptual exterior elevations, it shows we thought it through and that we're not just blowing in the breeze, that we're coming up with a game plan and we're going to find a way forward. And so setting it up in this manner sets us up for that success. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and we're all here and happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, at this time, we'd like to open up questions from the council and board members to staff for any questions you may have. Can we get them back up on the screen? Thank you. I'll start off with City Council. Is there any questions for staff? Yes, Michael Saragosa.
Thank you, Mayor. One question I had, and I don't know if anyone, I'm sure you all have done some at least preliminary studies, or some research, but is there any, in terms of funding, is there anything in the current stimulus that just came through that would potentially be a source? I mean, I know there's a lot in there, but just wondering if there's anything outside of the amounts that each city and county are receiving, but didn't know if there was anything specific to public safety that's part of it.
So this is Cleve Morris. I'll try answering that first, and then I don't know if Tim, Chief Cordero or Chief Wren have any input, but there is a lot of money in there, as we know, and this funding specifically to us, we are still trying to determine whether or not that, when it uses that term infrastructure, because it says infrastructure and then it says water and sewer facilities and broadband. There's nothing that specifically spells out facilities, but we have not received the final guidelines for that information yet. So there is a possibility that the specific funding to Placerville could be used for something regarding this. Regarding the other funding that is in the stimulus bill, we have not identified that at this point, but there may be. So I don't have a real solid answer for you yet, Councilmember Saragosa. Chief Wren or Chief Cordero, do you guys have any further information on that you can add?
Just on?
Yep.
Yeah, when we started this project, instead of approaching it through an individual department need or growth or development, one of the challenges that any governmental agency has is identifying the financial support to make that happen. So we knew there would be challenges if we independently sought out these grant opportunities. So as a public safety team concept where law enforcement, EMS, and fire work cohesively, we sat down, we talked, and we have seen examples of where when you build that combined facility and add in resources like an emergency operations center, community meeting rooms where funding was provided. So we believe the reason why we're taking this approach, first and foremost, is for efficiency and safety of the community, and a close second is because we believe we will be able to seek out that support through grants and different funding opportunities.
Thank you, Cleve. Thank you, Chief.
Anyone else on city council with a question? Oh, yes, Councilman Burley.
Thank you. Perhaps I'm jumping the gun, so maybe I should wait until after we see the presentation, but Chief Wren just kind of alluded to, I was wondering how by the two forces, the two entities joining forces, what they were going to do, and how does that save money? In other words, what's going to be shared, et cetera, et cetera.
I can address that. Thank you, Councilmember Burley. We've had some discussions about some of the shared spaces that we could have in this facility, such as meeting rooms, training rooms, workout rooms, storage areas. There's a lot of community space that we could have that would share and meet the needs of both agencies, break rooms and day rooms for the administrative staff, et cetera. So we've had some conversations about those common areas that we could share and really save on the individual needs. Whereas if there were separate buildings, we'd each be having to build those spaces. So there's a lot of areas that we could combine and share space.
Thank you.
Before you go on that, I'm just curious, is there real economies of scale there in terms of people per square foot? We talked about that because you're dealing with different agencies, different timings, different philosophies almost in your business practice, and that shared space.
I think we can probably tag in on this one together, and there will be workspaces and things that are needs for each individual agency. You're correct. The PD will have their needs, fire will have their needs. Where we're looking at combinations and areas that we could get some economy of scale is, for example, a community room, a meeting room type facility where both of us, there'd be just some scheduling has to take place. A gym facility where both the police officers and the firemen can work out, break rooms and stuff like that for the administrative staff. There are some opportunities, we believe, to have some shared space and common areas instead of having those individuals.
I agree, and I have a unique perspective. I actually came from a public safety department where police and fire shared administrative support. So, when I visioned this, I visioned where I came from and saw the efficiencies in that operation. And I was also present when the department split, and I saw the challenges that occurred when the two departments stood up independent of each other. While we have different missions on the fire and law enforcement side, our goal remains the same, and that's providing services to make the community as safe as possible. So while we have, infrastructure needs and a lot of those needs would overlap each other, I think being with our brothers and sisters in the fire department, and I'm talking from a police perspective solely, it would only make us a better police department. There's just better opportunities there to help us deliver our services to the community. And then you talk about the EOC, you talk about the community rooms, you talk about the training rooms, you talk about storage is always a big issue. I think that's it. I don't want to beat that up. Thank you. Anybody else with city council? All right, seeing none. Anybody with the fire board here?
Yeah, I think my question just goes to funding. I know that we're hopefully looking at grants and being able to fund it. That would be fantastic. What if we proceed in this process, chunk down $100 grand, and we're not able to get those grants? What does it look like for the cost that has to be involved from each of the agencies to start kicking in? Because that would mean that we now have a new mortgage or something else. And so that's an ongoing funding thing for us that would obviously we need to look at. So that's my question.
Chris, maybe I can first address that, and then I'll turn that to them.
Thanks.
Yes, the district has that issue, the city has the same issue. I don't have, several $100,000 a year that I could put towards financing a new facility.
Right. Yeah.
by the same token, we all recognize, I want to compliment Chief Wren and Chief Cordero for their presentations. I'm anxious to put this out to the public, because we need to sell this to the public and to know how serious this situation is, that we need new facilities here. It can't continue to go on. And we look at it and say, I was expecting one of the questions to be, well, we did this in 2002, we did that since 2014. Is this just going to be another effort that's going to say, okay, we got another study that we're putting on the shelf for us to go back and look at, 8 more years, 10 years from now. I certainly hope not, and my commitment, and I think the commitment of my staff, is that we can't let that happen. We've got to find another source. If it is not grant funding, which I'm very hopeful that we can find at least partial grant funding, if not full grant funding for this, we have to finance it, and we have to identify a way to pay for that financing, and that may be a new revenue source. That's all I'll say, is that we need to look at our options and seeing what we can work on. I think there's a great advantage, you've heard our chiefs talk about that, a great advantage in us working together on this. I know state and federal agencies look favorably upon collaboration between different entities and jurisdictions to work together and create facilities. So I think there's a great opportunity. I think our timing is very good right now. I think we need to move quickly with this to not miss out on funding that may come available, but I don't think I'm alone in saying that all of us have heard the comments coming out of Washington and the funding that is potentially coming out here in the very near future. The more ready we are to receive that funding and go after that funding, the better position we will be in going forward. So.
Thanks, Clayton.
I'd like to make a
Does
comment.
Rebecca have something to add to that as well? I want to hear what she has to say.
Thank you. Actually, I just wanted to speak a little bit to the grant funding application process and why, one of the main reasons why we selected this consultant. They showed up with their grant writer. They're ready to go. And this grant writer was also the one that wrote the grant that the city just successfully received, $1.2 million on Placerville Drive. And so they're very familiar with grant writing processes. They're very proactive in seeking them out, and they're very proactive on their applications. You can't compare the applications to anybody else's. They do these exhibits that tell the whole story. I feel very confident in the team that we have selected, that their abilities, because they've already proven it to me. Thanks,
Rebecca. I'm glad to hear that.
I have a question, Rebecca. When you went through the applicants to prepare this feasibility study, has this group also done these joint fire police stations? Because I noticed through there, they've done police, they've done fire, but how many have they done together in this kind of process?
They have, and as far as how many they've done together, I'm going to invite Will to come up and speak to that.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Will Oren from Dewberry Architects. So we've done a number of joint police fire facilities, mostly in the Midwest is where we're seeing a lot of that interest. Peoria, I can give you a detailed list if you want, but yeah, this is kind of the new model that we're seeing a lot of. We have done.
So there are economies in having them together, because I didn't think people brought up that if you have one heating air conditioning system running the whole facility rather than 2 separate buildings, there's an economy. I'm sure there's other economies that are achieved by having everything joined together.
I mean, we'll work through the operations of each department and find what those economies are, but I think there's also the benefit that Chief Wren alluded to, a co-location and a public safety response coordinated between fire and police. So I think there's that kind of added benefit.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing your presentation.
We're looking forward to digging into this. Any other questions for me?
I know Paul's got some questions.
Yep, I do. Toggle, is that what?
Yeah, just pull it. If you've got the link there, you pull it over to me, Paul. Keep pulling.
Thanks. Chiefs, thank you guys for the presentation. Rebecca, thank you also. All well put together. When I was reviewing this, and I touched base with Chief Cordero and had a chance to speak with Rebecca before, I'm coming at this after 30 years of project portfolio management, working with PG&E, Blue Shield, some of the larger organizations. And so my question's coming from purely project management and community involvement with this. So with that, some of the questions I did in looking at the material, it looked like, and I shared with Chief Cordero, and he did a great job today of expanding on what the dormitory requirements would be, living quarters, which is part of the day in the life of a firefighter in the fire service. And so I would like to see more of that information in there. It seemed like the fire came in as the tail end, and I know this started as in the city of Placerville, looking at police. So some of those things I saw, and Chief did a good job of presenting it, was the living areas. One of the things that caught my eye, because I was in technology all of my career, is how and I, to some of these economies of scale, I do know that if you have 2 technology rooms versus 1 consolidated, you're gonna save costs. I'd ask that in your study that we segregate out, and that's probably the wrong word, but I'd say separate out what the real cost savings are. To say, if we're doing this jointly, here's what it is. If we do it separately, here's the duplication of costs to the taxpayers. And I think that would be a good point for the community to understand and realize as we go into this. So, and then to some of the board members I talked with before, I had questions about the payment schedule, and Rebecca did a good job of answering that offline. So I just want people to know I'm satisfied with what was going on there. So I'm good with that. The other thing I'd say is, in my career, I always looked at lessons learned. And one of the things I would like to see in this is what worked well in your projects that you've done in the Midwest. What are the things you want to repeat and continue to do? And then on the other side of that, what didn't go so well, and we don't want to do that.
Sure.
And so, and I think in the Station 28, in the rebuild there, when I've toured the facility, I've seen some things that the firefighters have said, hey, this was a great idea, and this was just a bonehead idea. And so I think those are the things that we need to query our staff and get insight with, and so I'd encourage that. And then the final comment I have is relative to oversight. So for us on the fire side, and I'm not to minimize anyone else's perspective, this going down this path is probably one of the largest projects this fire district will take on.
Absolutely.
And so with that, I believe their proper oversight should be created, not to manage the project, to provide oversight from the elected officials. I'd also encourage to make sure that the public and citizens groups are involved, because this does involve the public. And so some sort of a joint oversight committee or subcommittee or whatnot with folks that are intimately aware. I would expect the chiefs to be on that committee. I would expect, frontline firefighters to be there. I'd expect members from each of our boards to be on that. And I would encourage us to try to find someone from the community to be there as well. So, and that's as an oversight perspective, not to get into project management. Although I lean that way, I wouldn't want to get into that too much.
Could you clarify for me
Sure.
what you mean by oversight, and what parts of the project, ongoing oversight of facilities and what's going on, or are you talking about just for the project?
Just for the project.
Okay.
And it would be, so from a and I'll speak from the fire side because that's what I'm involved with, is, as I noted, it's one of our largest endeavors ever. And I think to make sure that we're financially on top of it, not that we wouldn't be able to take it into a committee format where details could be vetted out and not necessarily dragged out in an overall board meeting, and be able to present with direction and how things are going to the board, or any recommendations that might come up for a modification and direction, not course change, but just like if you're sailing to tack appropriately.
Right. I'm thinking through all, from a project standpoint, and I know as we deal with projects in the city, and we have a few oversight committees that we deal with, sometimes
they can slow it down, especially in the process of construction. And I know even when we have to come back for, when we come back for, change orders, and sometimes they have to wait 2 and 3 weeks to get it on our agenda, to get it processed, and we've had projects just come to a screeching halt because this needs to be approved, or we have to have special meetings that go through this process. So I would want to be cognizant of that issue as well, especially if you're going through a committee to bring it to, and with our road construction and our sewers that we deal with, it's a slower process, I would imagine, than a construction project. So I just want to be cognizant of that at the same time.
Yeah, sure, and I don't, by no means do I want it to be slowed down. I just want to be able to demonstrate to the public that the due diligence is occurring and that the appropriate and proper focus is there.
Right.
And I
agree completely with that too. I think it's a public, what am I trying to say? Public, outreach. Well, they're feeling comfortable with what we're doing. Yeah, I think it's criticalness, and I think that's a lot of what we do up front as opposed to on the back end.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest part, I think, for us is to just make sure that we're not blindsided by anything, that we feel like we're involved in it. I have full confidence that, Dewberry probably knows what they're doing and can, you probably don't need my, as a average Joe input on things, but we just don't want to be blindsided by someone to go, well, wait a minute, why, so I think if we were able to get updates, able to bring things back to us that, like you say, we can report back to the board and say, here's how this is going. I don't personally want to be involved with the day-to-day stuff on it. I think the chief and having folks that are key, at least from our side, to be right in the back pocket of Dewberry to go, hey, how are we looking with this? That would be what I would want.
Yeah.
Just for us to have all that full awareness of it.
And I'll just add, when I first came onto the board, when I was appointed, we were under a Measure B, looking at going forward with Measure B. And we got resounding feedback from the Taxpayers Association as to direction and a lesson. And the president of the taxpayers is in my division.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very cognizant of working with him and getting them on board. And so that's my point on that.
Yeah. I see a whole education process, a whole, if and when we go down that road and how the funding goes to, it's gonna be intense because, I'm sure, well, I've been in your shoes when we were looking at, going out for funding.
Yeah.
And the amount of arrows you take in that process, as well as, the community support. So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
And we want more support than arrows. So.
No question.
Agreed.
Rebecca, how are you gonna administer this? I know I work with you on other projects and you provide us with a lot of details, specifically on H&L, but what about on this project, what would your involvement be?
Well, speaking directly to that question, the involvement would be, at whatever the chiefs need. I'm referred to there as a hired nerd, so anything that they need for assistance, I'm obviously here to support them. Also, I wanted to speak to the oversight committee, Chair Kaiserman, Director Kaiserman, pardon me. He is actually on our Measure HL committee. And Measure HL are the 2 sales tax measures that we currently have in place that help us address sewer pipes, water pipes, storm drain, and road projects. And the committee is comprised of citizens within that, within the town and also different areas within the town. And along with our staff liaison, which is Assistant City Manager Dave Warren, Director of Finance, every opportunity we get when we get our project list, we go through it. We meet with them several times a year. There's no surprises. We make ourselves available to answer questions that they have at any moment. That committee serves as a source for City Council in terms of, as a resource for City Council in terms of recommendations and how to best proceed and how to manage those funding. So from our perspective, we 100% agree with the no blind sides or no surprises approach, and that is critical, I think, for all of us in this process. I also wanted to speak to, the process on how we got Measure L2. We went through a, very long and yet successful process in terms of, providing information. You know, as an agency, we're not allowed to advocate for the measure, but we are allowed to provide public information and education on the matters at hand. And that would be if we go down that path. If we are not successful in grant funding, we would then go through that education process as well. And that process was successful because of that community involvement, that community outreach. And so absolutely, we are looking forward to bringing people up to speed. As I mentioned, you know, there's so few folks that actually know what the interior of those facilities currently serve and the challenges day to day that they have to face. And so daylighting that information is key.
And I concur with that. Mickey and I serve on the finance committee for county fire, and he's made me very much aware and informed with that. And I think, absolutely, and I think it's a good model, and I think it's an approach that would maybe tweak a tad bit because it's a joint effort, but I think conceptually that's a very positive direction. And I think that's independent of the funding direction we go, just so that people are on board and we don't have the surprises.
Absolutely.
So I think that's great.
I think you benefit from both Mickey and I being on the Measure L committee. We served together on that, and it was a very successful campaign. Matter of fact, it was the third highest vote of the people in all of California in that year of all the measures that went out, and it was very successful. So.
Well, hopefully we get grant funding. We don't need to
Yeah,
vote on
I'm with you on that. And so, you know, there's a lot of opportunity there. You hit on a lot of the questions that I had, and I think, you know, learning from their experience in the Midwest is critical in how we bring in that information. And not only just you having that knowledge, but sharing that knowledge with us so it's an informed decision on our side. I think that's extremely critical. Because that can become part of our education process. Even if we go with grant funding, there's going to be matching funds more than likely.
Right.
I don't know that this would get 100%, and so we're both going to have to dig deep to figure out where we're going to go with this. And you know, we haven't set aside money to do this, and I don't know that you guys have yet. But I can tell by the giggles, I probably know. And so we're all, you know, but at the same time, one of the things I look at is that we're gonna grow, and I have a very positive outlook for our county, for our city. I think there's opportunities to expand and grow, and I think people want to see us move forward and lift up our city and our county fire, and that's an important part of just being in our positions to highlight the good that's going on in our community. And as part of that, it is, you know, our fire and our police are one of the biggest, most important things that our community looks to us to provide. And so I just can't imagine not finding a way to do this now. And I think that has to be a critical effort on both the city and the fire's job. I just can't see a way that we don't do this now.
Yeah.
And so that's from my perspective.
I'll echo that. So my day job is I'm a fire captain for Sacramento Fire Department, and what I can say is that down there, our headquarters for at least our administration is a joint facility, and so we have a public safety joint facility. In that, we don't have enough room there to house 25 fire stations and numerous rolling officers every day, so that does not work for us. But here, I believe that we do. But also, some of the highlights on that, and I will say that we and also our folks in blue, which I appreciate very much, we do not complain. And that was the first time I've got to see back behind the bulletproof glass in Placerville PD's, and it's, I'm sorry, is what I can say. And then, so that needs to be changed. Absolutely 100% for sure. I'm 100% on board with that. For the fire side, obviously, we shouldn't be walking through the fire station with dirty turnouts ever. We have a policy in Sacramento that I don't let you come into my firehouse with dirty turnouts ever. And then now we're building for expansion. Any of our new firehouses have 3 apparatus bays. We don't back up into our bays, we drive through because most of our accidents happen backing up. And so those are kind of the things we look and build for expansion. So I think that certainly now is the time, and I'm 100% on board with having a public safety model. I think that brings our community in 100%. We can house our EOC in there, and I think that I would say we fail as an organization to allow our public to be a part of our facilities. We have been, I could say that as in general, at least on the West Coast, as a fire service, we're not very good at having people like be really, really involved. That's a passion of mine, is to change that. So those are my comments. I really do appreciate the folks that are here today, because I know what you guys deal with every day, and I know that it's totally, completely inadequate, but you do what you do because that's just your nature. That's why you work in the job. So thank you.
I'll make one more comment. It's really important that, and we know all this, that we communicate to the public all the deficiencies we have here. Because they don't see it. They see the fire engine pull up, they see the police car pull up, you get the service. They don't know what happens behind the scenes, and they need to see that. It was the same thing we did with Measure L. It was education. That's why we got a 2/3 vote on that. We educated everybody. We went to everyone in the city, made sure everybody understood what the issue was and what was going to cost them if they didn't do it. So it's important that we give that outreach, and I think the city is getting better, and so is the fire department in doing that, communicating to the public. We never really have great marketing for ourselves, but we're getting better at doing it.
In your study, is it possible to evaluate the cost, and I don't know what this looks like, but the cost of doing nothing?
That's a good point.
Actually,
I think that's a great comment, and to me, that's, in technology, we looked a lot at that, and there's putting a cost, it's a lost opportunity cost, or the aspect of not doing it, what it means to the safety of the community, to the safety of the personnel, to the service being provided. And I think if we can put that in, that's an excellent point. And
if I may, I'll speak to that. So this is actually not an uncommon request on projects, the cost of doing nothing, right? So we are able to provide that in the report. I'll work with Will on what we've done in other past projects to daylight that effort. The other part of it too I want us to consider is, there is a whole host of legislature in place, codes, compliance, equality within the facilities, and a whole host of measures that need to be addressed in the deficiencies of both facilities. And that comes with a cost as well for not doing it. So that was a great question. Thank you.
Is there a way to cite lives lost or things that went wrong because of the inadequate facilities?
We can certainly daylight that, and we'll work through that, but I will add a note here. Yeah.
actually, that triggers a thought with one of our past chiefs had noted that the ability to respond, there was a lower loss of property damage. I think Chief Hogan referenced that several times as to the effect of not being able to respond properly or support that. And I think that was a very valuable approach to looking at services.
Yeah, some of the tangibles that we have at the police department, obviously injuries that have occurred because of the inefficient design of the building, accidents, very small parking spaces, so we're damaging city property and privately owned vehicles. Kind of globally, what agencies have experienced, I would say within the last 5+ years, is fentanyl. When you don't have proper ventilation or processing areas, we watched training videos not too long ago of officers processing this stuff in an area that's inadequate to do so. As a result, they've been exposed, and thankfully they've received medical attention almost immediately. But it's, you know, tugs at your heart when you watch an officer who's just doing their job, processing evidence, pass out, and if nobody was there, they would overdose and die. So, there are those things that absolutely need to be looked at for the safety of both of our departments' greatest resource, which is our people.
One last question I had was some of the timing and key milestones that we might see. I said the chevrons that you had here said phases, and I'm interested in timing as far as, you know, quarter, year, and then what are some key milestones that we would see within those chevrons?
Sure.
Or outcome as an output of those chevrons.
Absolutely. So as we move forward, we anticipate, and I believe this study is going to take 8 weeks.
Plus or minus.
Yeah.
Review time.
Right. So it'll take about a month to prepare the initial draft document, and then review times included, and some back and forth in terms of developing the document. Then the anticipated time frame for delivery is 8 weeks. So from that point moving forward, we would then, I imagine, bring it back here to board and council to review and give everybody an opportunity to review it, provide questions, comments, concerns, and then move forward as a standard approach. So this is a pretty standard operating procedures as far as project delivery. You know, we do feasibility studies all the time throughout the city in terms of planning documents and even our engineering documents. I'm trying to develop a path forward on projects that have several options. We always come back and request direction on how to best proceed, and that would be the intent of doing that as well. Did that answer your question?
Go ahead. Oh, and I was going to say, that's for phase 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Now that you're still there. Can you know, because there's people watching this, and people might watch it another day and see what's going on here. Can you talk to how important this process is? Because this is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it, you know, when we came up with $30,000, and our half of that was 15, I was like, boy, at times right now, that was kind of a, you know, a pill to swallow, because this has sat on the shelf since 2002 and 2014 or 15, and you know, it's the reality. It has sat on the shelf and collected dust, and it hasn't been a priority. Why is this so important right now that we do this? And how are we going to avoid? Did you plan that?
He called him. He has to drive by right on the page.
Why is it so, to educate people, why is this so important that we do this? Is it important?
He's gonna answer your
All right.
question.
Let me answer that if I can. I will say a little bit, you know, I've been here for 10 years now, so I didn't live through the 2002 one, but I did live through the 2014 one. That one, actually, just so you know, that update that was done at that time, the current police chief at the time got the consultant to actually update that at no cost. So nobody was really involved with that process. It was just kind of a, let's go see where we're at. And then let's look at it and what could we do. But I think my answer to you is, I honestly have to say I'm a little bit embarrassed. I knew all these things. I've been through both stations, walked through them and seen the situation. But I honestly have to say I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that these are the facilities we're providing for some of our key employees in the city and the district both. And to me, as I looked at that, and as we looked at going into this study, I don't know what more to say than just we can't let it continue. It has to be critical. I think the grand jury report saw it. We see it, and we just need to recognize that this needs to rise to the top in terms of what is a priority for us in the city. In answer to
as far as project.
yes, the key is this is just the first step, and I think we're as I mentioned before, in an excellent position. One of the things I want to emphasize is that I think we're doing this right to this point, and I think we need to continue down that road. The fact that our police chief and fire chief from two separate organizations are standing side by side back there, and I'll let you know, I invite, Chief Cordero to my weekly staff meeting that he attends. I love having him there, so that we're looking at the same things. We're dealing with some of the same issues, whether it be funding or whatever, infrastructure, facilities, as we are now. And they're on the same page. Chief Wren and Cordero, I will say they rib each other once in a while, but they're on the same page, and they recognize the value of working together. Even now, although we're not in the facility, they work together on different issues related to homeless, vegetation management, et cetera, and we really appreciate that, the work that they're doing there. So my comment to both the city council and the district board is we can't let this continue. This has to be a top priority for us, and we have to work through this and figure out a way to get it done.
Thank you, Cleve. So is there any further questions at this point in time? What I'd like to do is open up for public comment and at this time, so Regina, if you could help us out, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Public comment is now open for item 5.1, the Public Safety Building Needs Assessment Study Project. If you are joining by phone, press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. If you're joining by computer, please press the raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. You'll have 3 minutes to address your comments to the City Council. We'll just wait a few more moments. We have public comment from John Clarici. Go ahead, John.
Not that you people wanted to have somebody comment, but I felt bad. This is such an important thing. Somebody needs to comment. I think this is obviously long overdue. The circumstances for the police department are just, if you go through there, it's sad and it needs to be fixed. These are important people doing important jobs. All city employees are important, by the way, but you know, this situation is what it is. And I think that if we get the right group of people like we did for Measure L together, and we do the legwork as has already been discussed, I think we can be successful in the event that, what is the popular phrase now? Grant hustling, that's it. If we can't hustle after grants appropriately, don't even know what that means, then yes, we need to go out to the ballot box, and I'd be willing to help with that if anybody cares. Anyway, good luck with this. Great idea, more of it. And now you've got a public comment. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks, John.
Well, the thing is, John was able to find his unmute button this time.
Positive public comments are accepted as well. We just need to let that know. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take public comment from Jacob Poganski. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Jacob Poganski. I am a president for the El Dorado County Professional Firefighters Association. And I rise today in support of the endeavor to create a joint public safety facility in the city of Placerville. For over 167 years, firefighters have been protecting the city and community of Placerville. And for over 70 of those years now, that service has been delivered from the Sacramento Street Fire Station. As a facility that was originally built to provide apparatus parking and support of volunteer firefighting operations. The current facility has strained to now house 24-hour firefighting and EMS units, as well as a duty division chief. There are many opportunities for us to optimize and better serve the communities of Placerville that require us to modernize, expand our fire station so that it can support the operations necessary to have an effective firefighting force. And I hope that everyone involved can understand the tremendous benefit that a joint public safety facility will provide. Our community, they rely on the response that our firefighters provide, and our facility shouldn't only evoke civic pride, but also adequately provide for the support of our response now and well into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Barbara Driscoll Rogers, go ahead. Please unmute yourself.
Good morning. I fully support this endeavor. I worked out of both places, out of Placerville Station And then I worked at the police department out of the public safety building for 8 years. So it's a long overdue project. I think the public safety building was a bad design from the get-go. And I wish you guys luck. I don't live in the city, but I do support what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Barbara.
All right, seeing no more. Ms. O'Connell, is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment at this time on the presentation. And I'm going to move on to item number 4 of the city council agenda. And if we can get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Move.
All right, so it looks like Kara motioned and Patty seconded. We'll get a roll call, please.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Councilmember No?
Aye.
Councilmember Zaragoza? Councilmember Zaragoza, you're on mute.
Oh, he had to step away. Yeah, he had to step away for a separate meeting, so he may not be available at this time.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Taylor
Aye.
and Mayor Thomas?
Aye. Oh, Vice Zaragoza back. Go ahead and check with.
Michael, may we have your vote on adoption of the agenda?
You're muted, Michael.
Did you shake your head? No, he doesn't hear us either. All right.
Text him.
So we're good there.
Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and give it to the fire department to do their.
Okay, yeah, so we would be also on item 5 for what we have done for adoption of the agenda as well.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second.
Hey, Pierre.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay. So we do the item 6, which is finance. That'll be the money spending part. We'll do a roll call on that.
Yeah. I'm gonna, give me just a second. So, okay, let's put about 2 on it.
No sound.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and handle our agenda and move through our portion of approving or not the motions or the items of course. So, to you.
No problem.
I actually didn't think this through before I got here today, so we're gonna build this as we go here.
No problem. The only thing that we'll have is our item 6 for the departmental matters to be approving spending the money, so we can do that when you go to that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right, okay, absolutely. So I'm gonna, let's see, how are we doing this? I'm gonna give this to you for.
Yeah, Rebecca, are you guys having a further presentation on this, right? On the actual agenda item, the resolution and the proposal for cost?
Yes.
For funding.
Yeah, we have some talking points.
So you want to turn over to them now?
Yes,
Mayor?
please.
Okay.
No.
And I think Chief Bren and I are gonna tag team with that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. What you have before you is a staff report concerning acceptance of Dewberry Architects Incorporated to perform a needs assessment study. On February 11, 2020, the City Council and the El Dorado County Fire Protection District set aside $15,000 each for a total of $30,000 to conduct needs assessment for a combined police and fire public safety facility. The city sent out a RFP solicitation, which generated 7 responses to this project. An evaluation was done, was conducted by the selection team, which consisted of myself, District Fire Chief Cordero and City Attorney Rebecca Neves. At the conclusion of this evaluation, Dewberry Architects Incorporated was selected. During the course of response review and subsequent interviews, it became apparent that $30,000 was going to miss our target considerably. So we need to reevaluate, and that's why this staff report is before you today. So each firm submitted a project cost with their responses. It was evidence the scope of work of this project would exceed $30,000, which was combined cost originally approved by the city and the district. So the average cost from the firms that were interviewed was $194,650, with Dewberry's original cost at $178,000 to conduct the scope of work required for this project. As a result of this updated cost estimate, staff is proposing an increase from the approved $15,000 from the city of Placerville to $90,000 from the city of Placerville to proceed with this project for a combined public safety building. Now, there's been some updates to that cost figure, and I'll let Rebecca discuss that.
Thank you, Steve. So as we reviewed the proposal, we had some criteria in terms of wanting to find a consultant that would basically, paper doesn't do us any good, right? Construction does. So we really wanted to pick and select a team that we knew could deliver us from concept to construction. And in that evaluation process, both the chief and myself went through the numerous proposals and felt confident and selected two to interview, one being WLC, and the other being Dewberry. In the interview process, it rose to the top pretty quickly that the Dewberry team already had their eye on the prize in terms of getting this facility built. And that's really what we needed. Staff does a great job carrying their regular workload, and we also needed a champion that could drive the project forward. And that's what all three of us felt comfortable with. So in review of the initial scope and proposal that was provided, Chief kind of daylighted some of it. So the average cost of the proposal that we received was actually closer to $200,000. So it's about $194,650 was the average. The proposal prepared and submitted by Dewberry was $178,000. Upon review of the scope of work and the cost of services, we worked further with Will, and he did a great job refining his scope. Right from the get-go in the interview process, they said, look, we're here to get you what you need, and we're going to work with you on how to get there. He's actually hired Dewberry on a couple of occasions, and never once have they not negotiated through to a contract. Now, the benefit of that negotiation process is where we actually refined the scope we needed, and it also reduced the contract value. So the contract value actually before you today is $100,000, not $178,000. So that is what is being recommended for approval at this time. If you have any other questions regarding the process and the contract, I'm happy to answer them along with both chiefs.
That's what's going to get us what we need for trying to obtain a grant. That's $100,000 study.
That's the intent of it, yes. It's a foot and door method, yes.
And so that's $50K per entity.
Correct.
And so is that, and that's a not to exceed number?
That would be the contract limit that they would not be able to spend beyond. I would recommend adding some to that for contingency,
Sure.
which obviously before we would issue an amendment to the contract, we would come before council and the board. As we, we got a little too far ahead on the scope in terms of, don't worry about tomorrow if you don't even know what you're doing today, right? Mm-hmm. So today, we're trying to figure out what we need, where are the deficiencies, how can they be addressed, how do our folks get what they need, and then how do we bundle it all up, including considering the cost of doing nothing, and put that, because that right there becomes your meat and potatoes of your grant application. When we prepare these grant applications, we daylight the fact that we are worthy of this grant application and poor. And I think we qualify for both of those. So as we move forward with that effort, that's the intent behind what we've done right now. Now, do I think that we may need some supportive tasks in other places at some point? Yes, I do. This is not an exhaustive effort. This is our initial approach, but it does get us to a point where we can start looking at applying for grant funding.
So in that feasibility study, does it give us an overall cost of what it's going to do for this project so that you can apply for the grant, including a site selection cost and all that?
That's a little further down the road, yeah. So as of right now, we don't even have a new site, if that's where the direction we end up heading. We don't even have a new site selected. That's pretty far down the road. So I always like to look at things in terms of, you know, marriage and children, right? Something we can all relate to. So marriage, you know, this process right here is the marriage of the two people moving forward on this venture. And then the assessment process, or the needs assessment and the deficiency, is going to be us identifying, you know, what our current living status is and how we're going to move forward. And then as we figure that out, then we're going to have the discussion, how do we have kids? So as we move forward, we're going to figure out how we're going to have that baby and also importantly, where are we putting that baby?
So you're saying we could, with this 100 grand, we could apply for grant funding, but we don't know what we're applying for in dollars.
Not yet, not yet. And this effort will help us get there.
And does that create a risk associated with not having that defined, Mickey? Is that where you're going at?
Yeah, we don't know the number. What are we grant funding for?
Right, that's the whole point of this needs assessment, is that will be the supporting information to help us identify where we're headed. That's why we have schematic design included under phase 3. We have conceptual site plans, conceptual floor plans, and things like that. So we're gonna have a first blush look at square footage, size, layout, at a schematic level. And that piece of information will then support the grant application.
So putting on my project management hat and the years of experience, what it sounds like is it's short of a wrong estimate that's going to be produced of this, but it's not actually going to be a definitive estimate. We're going to come out with a rough costing in between of a rough order of magnitude and a definitive. And I'm asking our consultant that directly.
Yeah, we can provide we've included costs for rough order of magnitude, and we have parallel projects that we can compare to.
And that will be sufficient for the grant funding request.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
So one thing I want to talk about too, and thank you, and I apologize for kind of weeding through it a little bit and took me a minute, sorry. Second cup of coffee leaving me with a reckless abandon. As we move forward with even previous grant applications, I'll give Placerville Drive, our recent success with Dewberry as an example. So we're actually in environmental right now. So, I mean, in a sense, environmental is where you pick your, typically, where you would pick your preferred alternative and direction for the project. And so having that information, teetering in funding and environmental, you have to do enough design to support the effort to get through environmental, and you have to do enough estimating to get to understand where you're at. We do rolling contingencies. We do identify those potential issues that are along the road too. So when we move forward on this effort, we will have a healthy contingency in the cost estimates.
Okay.
We're very conservative on our cost estimates.
Can I ask one more clarifying question?
Sure.
Thank you. So, you two?
No, you said one, I was saying just one.
We'll find out at this moment. Okay. Well, boy. So I'm a little confused. I understand a little bit about project development. Where do we stand at the end of this, when we get our report back and it tells us everything? Will it give us enough meat to go out for grants for construction or grants for further design and development? I mean, at what stage are we at in this process?
We're in the very initial stages, so this would be considered preliminary engineering project planning stage. So the answer to your question is yes, we would actually be seeking out grant funding for all phases of the project. You have preliminary, you have design, you have right-of-way, you have construction, and you have, construction management oversight. Yes, and then also, thank you. I almost answered that question earlier. So Dennis raised up the rule of 5, and for those of you who have heard me talk about projects, there's always the rule of 5, right? So you've got utility, you've got environmental, you've got right-of-way, you've got funding, and you have the sum, political will. And that's where the public outreach part comes into it too. Much to my humbling, engineering is never one of these. So whenever we do projects, we move forward with that 5 in mind, and how do we check off those 5?
So at the end of this contract we have with Dewberry, this initial contract we have, we could go for grant funding for the entire project.
Yes.
I think that's ultimately the question.
Yes, and we also need to be aware that much to the magnitude of, I'll use my Placerville Drive example again, much to the magnitude of the size of the project, it may be a continuous effort in terms of eating the elephant one bite at a time. The funding that we just were awarded, the $1.2 million, covers the rest of design and right-of-way to get us to bid documents for Placerville Drive. We still have construction funding to go after for that. But it puts us in a great position to be ready. So we may actually go after, and I anticipate this actually, we're probably going to go after multiple grants. And this grant may cover design and right-of-way, and this grant may cover utility coordination or components of the facilities. But we get pretty creative in terms of pulling together various pots of money when we do these projects, because it's very difficult to find one funding source for these. For example, the Western Placerville Interchange that is out to construction right now, I believe, has 5 different funding sources on it, just for construction. And that, you know, we are very resourceful in those public funds and how we use them. And luckily, they're also primarily state and federal funding too, which means we're bringing those dollars into our community, which is a great benefit for delivering projects. So we may take a segregated approach in terms of doing design and then finding and identifying grant opportunities for just construction too.
Thank you, and I'm gonna go to any of our council members that are via Zoom, and I can go with Councilmember Taylor first.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Chief Wren and Chief Cordero and Rebecca for, and Dewberry for all of this hard work and great presentations. Quick question, Rebecca, did I hear you correctly that, you know, the agenda item mentions that the contract would be 178,000. Did I hear you correctly that it's now down to 100,000? And if so, how did the scope change?
That is correct. So the scope was revised in terms of, I may have mentioned, we got a little far ahead of ourselves in how we had felt the scope. And much to Dewberry's compliment, actually, they were already thinking ahead. So part of their original scope did have components that I would actually consider final design measures. Right now, we need to figure out, like, you know, where we're going and how to get there in terms of the needs assessment. So it was a little bit over scope, but Will did a great job of refining it, and he did a great job of working with us on that contract price as well.
Okay, so is phase 2 of the original proposal out now, and the schematic designs and all that?
I'm sorry, repeat that question one more time.
The original proposal that's in our staff report had phase 1, which was the needs assessment, and phase 2 being schematic designs and, you know, 2 floor plans and things like that. Are we going with just phase 1 as a result of this change in scope?
We actually changed, so phase 1 is actually good to go. That essentially received no changes. We added in community outreach as phase 2. And then phase 3, what is now what used to be the old phase 2, although it is reduced because we had gotten into even the nuances and what I would consider actually finer detailed design points being mechanical and plumbing and things like that. You can actually do estimates based off of, you know, a per unit cost in a lot of ways. And so that I felt was a little bit more in depth. It also had inclusion of a structural engineer doing a tier 1 analysis of the existing facilities. And based on, you know, the presentations today, we may not be utilizing those existing facilities once this facility is developed and once we have an idea what we need. It may not house what's needed. So before we bid off too much, I asked Will to look at what our options are for currently removing the tier 1 analysis for the existing facilities and getting an understanding of, okay, where are we at and what do we need? I'd rather save that kind of level of detail and design, what I would consider final design and implementation from a structural engineer. I'd rather save that for the ultimate solution as opposed to this interim, checks and balances.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Taylor. Any other questions for, yes, Councilmember Saragos.
Thank you. And I apologize for my disruption there. I had to leave for a little bit and then came back in, and my microphone wasn't working, or I guess it was, but not on my end. Anyway, so one thing I may have missed is, so the this assessment part, what's the time frame? So when we move forward, what's the time frame to come back with sort of the next stage? And I apologize if this has already been gone over.
Great question, thank you. So the total time frame that we're anticipating is 8 weeks. It's going to be 4 weeks for the initial development of the draft and an iteration of time for review, comment, and then a final draft. We'll be presenting to council and board with recommendations on how to best proceed and requesting direction also. So that's actually probably going to happen above everything else as far as recommendations. So we would return the document back to both governing boards, citing, the items of concern in terms of needs and deficiencies. And then we would, identify if our current facilities could potentially meet those needs and assessments, so we can be very efficient in how we do this. And if they don't, that would certainly be daylighted as well. And then we would come back requesting direction from both governing bodies.
Thank you.
Any further questions from City Council? I'd like to apologize because my back has been to you a good part of this meeting, and I may not have seen hands raised and comments, so I apologize if I went on a little long without addressing any of your questions there. This is an unusual setup here, and I think I'm still getting used to it. So away we go. So I guess no further comments from council. We're going to open this up for public comment at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll open this up again, item 5.1. Mr. Mayor, I'm not seeing any public comment.
Thank you very much, Ms. O'Connell. Okay, one of the changes that's going to be made, I think Cleve and I worked the numbers.
With the reduction in the cost, one thing we didn't address specifically is whether or not we wanted to add a contingency at this time. Rebecca, we usually suggest at least a 10%. Is that what you would be looking at?
Typically, and actually you must have felt that, from our little crew over here. One thing I would recommend, originally the scope and fee actually was about $180,000 or so. So we'd allocated or considered doing $90,000 from each agency. Now with the revised scope and fee before you today, being the contract amount of $100,000, I recommend reducing that from 90 for each agency down to 70 for each agency. So a total combined $140,000, and that would cover the $100,000 contract and a $40,000 contingency. And again, I want to daylight the fact that, it's not like staff can go willy-nilly spend 40 grand at the whim. There's a process involved in returning back to council and board for amendments and reviewing the scope of work and increased scope of effort before we would award or even consider using the additional 40.
What types of situations would we, because, this is a fairly well set process in my mind, which may not be accurate. What types of things why does this, in construction, I can see you run into a pipe you didn't know was there or something like that. In this type of process, what would constitute a change in this need for more money?
So if we were to consider to go after, 1 or 2 grant funding sources, but then lo and behold, just because of current stimulus funding opportunities or other grant funding opportunities, we could find ourselves in a situation where we would be going for a whole host of grants. And the way that these grants are structured, they don't typically ask the same questions, and you know, they kind of have a goal. And if you're going for specific components, for example, if you're going for funding for an EOC, it's going to be really specific to what that EOC will entail to get that portion funded, right? So the other contingency, the other part the contingency would also cover is public outreach. And I want to remind everybody that public will is the sun, right? So when we go through the public outreach component, the other thing is that grants typically require public input. So we actually, on the Placerville Drive project, we went through quite an extensive public outreach effort. We did a MetroQuest survey, we did public meetings, we did mailers, flyers, little postcards for it, and that volume of effort to engage the public to gain their support for a project is also paramount in terms of being a successful grant application. So there could be a higher level of effort that we won't be able to identify until we see that grant release.
So question, where I was, and I know this changed just this last 3 days, so I apologize. I'm getting up to speed with you, council and board at the same time. Does the current proposal at $100,000, does that include some grant writing
Yes.
services?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yeah. It includes about $10,000 of that.
okay, all right.
If I can add, may I?
Please do.
So I just ran some quick numbers from Project Management Institute as far as preliminary budgeting, ROM budgeting, and what they call as a budget when you get information. The number that you provided falls well within the range, because if we were at a budget, formulating a budget, it's supposed to be minus 10% to plus 25% of the cost of the project, and in a preliminary, it's minus 15 to plus 50%. And with what Rebecca stated there, I think that ask for that contingency is well within international standards for budgeting as to where we're at in the process.
I was gonna say that. Thank you for beating me to the punch.
Thank you.
If I can just update you then, for the council on our side, looking at the agenda item, which is adoption of the resolution, we would approve the project rather than for $178,000, it would be $140,000. Well, $100,000 plus the $40,000 contingency, correct?
Yes, sir.
Which what that does for our item number 3 for the budget appropriation from the contingency will remain at $15,372. Item number 4 for $58,628 will be reduced to $39,628 on the city side. Does that make sense to you, Rebecca? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Good job.
Councilmember Borelli, you had a question.
I did, and you know, I think maybe this may have been covered, but it kind of went by me. You're talking about a possibility of finding a new site. I was always under the impression that we were looking at our present site plus the lot that we purchased. So is it the needs assessment that's going to determine whether that's not a big enough property, or maybe you could just explain a little bit better to me?
Certainly. Great question. Yes, that needs assessment will be our decision-making document for both agencies. And that will help us determine if it is possible to serve the needs at the existing sites. That may not be possible. It may be possible. You know, we're always optimistic, and we never like to throw away anything, right? So as far as that document goes, we will be looking at our current facilities and the size and the needs that we have. Are they being met? And then how could we meet them moving forward? The site may not be large enough. And if I may, Chief Cordero, I'll just speak to the size of the parcel that Station 25 currently sits on. It's a pretty tight little parcel. And the station itself, the footprint, obviously, as illustrated today, does not serve its current facility and needs. So, including, as you may have heard, the drive-through bays for fire trucks. right? That's kind of a big need. And the other thing that we're looking at too is, for consideration, is we're looking at future expansion. We are serving over 30% more of our officers at our PD facility than when it was originally designed, where it was already tight when they moved in, right? So we've done a really good job of compressing and being efficient with our spaces, but our space may not be big enough. After you have that first baby and then you realize your 2-bedroom house isn't working anymore, it might be time to get a 3-bedroom house if you get another baby.
So I think that's where my confusion rests, is that, for so long, I advocated, and as did others, to try to purchase that lot next door just for such, what you're talking about, for future expansion. And I was under the impression that, that was going to probably solve our problem. And then I want to piggyback on this. Several years ago, when we were looking into this, several sites were investigated. Are any of those still open, or are those, the process have to begin all over?
Let me address that just quickly. Number one, on the current site, I will tell you that we've had some discussions internally. My preference would still be to see if that site is sufficient to work, because it's something we own. We did buy the additional parcel. There may be a potential for expanding that site a little bit more to make it work for what our needs are, let's put it that way. However, a reminder, Councilor Borelli, also, when we purchased that parcel, I don't believe we were envisioning a joint facility at the time. So that's the other piece that has come into that changes the scope of what we need to look at. In terms of other parcels, I think that this first phase will give us what we need to determine what parcels we can look at for the future. And we have already talked about various parcels, and I believe the ones that you're referring to that have been mentioned in the past have come up in our conversations, potentially to look at for the future also.
Thank you.
Any further questions from council? Yes, Councilmember Nell.
Rebecca said that she was asking us for 70,000 from each agency, but what you gave us for 3 and 4 only adds up to 55,000 for each agency. So where is the additional 15,000?
You recall that you already allocated 15 for the original process last year, and that has been carried over. So that's already allocated for the project.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like a motion?
Pardon me?
Would you like a motion?
That would be great.
Okay, I'll move that we adopt resolution 5.1, 1 through 4 with the following changes. The contract amount is 140,000. And for item number 4, that will be 39,628 instead of the 58,000.
Perfect.
I'll second it.
All right, first and second. Ms. O'Connell, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Borelli,
Aye.
Councilmember No,
Aye.
Councilmember Zaragoza,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Taylor,
Aye.
Mayor Thomas.
Aye. Thank you very much. And at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Chairman Chris Schwarber.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So we're just going to continue on kind of from where we were at. So right now we're at the point of item 6 on our agenda, which would be departmental matters. And so what we would need to do is just adjust that for the amount, and our amount that we're going to adjust from the 90 is down to 70,000 for the chief's liberty to spend up to that point in time. So I think it sounds to me like we probably got the same amount of questions answered, and I'm glad that we put in the contingency in there, because I was actually going to suggest we probably add that in, and thanks for the analysis on that, because it puts a spot on to there. So I'll go ahead and open that for any board discussion if there's any.
Well, basically, we already have 15,000 allocated, so we need an additional 55.
Yeah, and so I've had discussions with the chief, and he can expound on this about where we have already seen some cost savings and monies that we did not spend. So I'm sure that you can direct us in where that money comes from for the extra that we have not spent.
Correct, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, within our, budget, we did allocate the 15,000 for the original contract, and underneath our line item of 4,300, which is professional services, currently right now, we're running about $100,000 under the budgeted amount. There are some additional bills that will be coming under that from DTA with our Nexus study, as well as LAFCO for the recent projects. So I would anticipate probably another $20,000 to $25,000 worth of bills coming in on that. So there is gonna be residual money in that account, that line item, to meet the needs of this project. We also, as I presented to the board, a couple of weeks ago, did receive, authorization, granting from the county on some TOT funding that's gonna be due on, July 1st for $68,000 for our calls that we do run up in the U.S. Forest Service area. So, that amount is within our budget needs.
We also have the Nexus study that's being completed right now that comes up at the next board meeting of the fire department. And we have reserves in there that I believe can be used to pay for this as part of the funding that's been reserved for.
That's correct. Our development fees right now currently sit at about 1.9 million. And we anticipate, that going up a couple $100,000 because there's some invoicing needs to take place for the city, but we do have about 400,000 right now. We anticipate that going to 5 to 6, with the development in the city, so.
Yeah, so part of the reason why we had kind of, tried to align this was so that, because our next, obviously our next agendized board meeting, includes the Nexus that we hopefully are able to pass through, and that way we'll be able to access those funds.
But it has to go to the city and the county.
Correct.
County.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
There is still a process there.
Yep.
Yeah, Mickey, I think we could certainly, I feel confident in the numbers that Chief has provided, but I believe in our finance committee meeting next Tuesday, any discrepancies, we'll figure it out, right?
Yeah, we have places to pay for the 55.
Yeah.
Right now,
Yeah.
but hopefully, I'm hoping we can get out the Nexus.
Yeah.
Right.
We haven't, we still haven't even gone under contract with the CAL FIRE thing yet, so have we yet?
That actually, I got a phone call yesterday from Chief Blankenheim, and we're working on scheduling a date next week to sign. He has all the documents.
Okay.
Through. Just a matter of
But there's savings.
We had planned on paying from November though, correct? So, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we're gonna be fine.
Yep.
A couple comments here. So in broad numbers here, we're saying we've got base funds, we're authorizing a 50K, then we have a contingency of 20K, correct?
Correct. So we're gonna authorize the chief to spend up to 70K.
Correct. And so I'm just, and this comes from my career, is if we approach to go towards the contingency spend, I'd like a notification that we would be approaching the contingency spend.
I believe
So-
Rebecca will come back to us. If we hit that contingency monies, I believe that's you come back to us saying, hey, we need the contingency money.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and my comment is not that we would grant permission to spend the contingency. My comment is that we're aware of it
Yeah.
and why we're there.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And so,
we daylight any kind of amendments to
Yeah.
contracts, we daylight the additional scope of services. We're particularly thorough in terms of if there is, expansion on current scope, we daylight that as well. And we're very meticulous in terms of not having a effort double scope. That's
perfect.
critical.
Okay, yeah, and no disrespect, I just
No,
don't
not
know,
at all.
I'm just asking.
No, these are great questions.
And
These
so-
are great questions.
So to be clear, we're giving the chief, we don't have to grant permission to anything up to 70K because we're giving you the authority today to spend the 70K. So that would not necessarily come back to us. However, when we hit that 50K, we're gonna know about it.
We need, yeah, and understand it.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
and if we say pump the brakes, then that's a whole different discussion, but the authorization's there. Okay, 2 more points. Well, we already covered Nexus study.
Yeah.
So 1 more point. So as I read this, in our amendment, it says negotiate with City of Placerville. I don't want to assume anything. I just want to make sure I'm clear that that's to negotiate with the city manager and the police chief. Is that correct? And Rebecca?
Correct. The one thing that we had discussion on is if this is approved and we move forward, we'll have to figure out the billing component to, whether it's gonna be, is Dewberry able to bill 50% equally to the fire district from the city? Is it gonna be something where Dewberry bills the city and then the city bills the fire district and we reimburse? That's part of the contract. We'll have to iron out, is how that billing component works.
Right, and so that covers my billing concern, thank you. The other aspect is to make sure that, as we talked yesterday, Chief, the uniqueness of, well, both agencies have very unique aspects. We have the living quarters and those things, and I just want to make sure that Chief is negotiating with all the parties, and that when it says City of Placerville, that's the three folks that have been, I'm thinking City Manager, Rebecca, and the Police Chief. And so I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
That's fine, yep.
Yeah, okay.
And the negotiation
do we need
is
to-
on the billing component of it. We'll actually be working with Dewberry on the facility needs and that sort of.
So, okay, so you're saying the professional service agreement, you were only talking about the billing aspect, not the needs.
The second bullet in my staff report refers to the billing component of how we're gonna iron out the billing.
Okay, so then I got the billing, but I just want to make sure for facilities that,
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
we will,
yeah.
They're all
we'll be well engaged.
yeah. And I.
Not that,
we
not
were
that Joe
like-
wouldn't bill us a good, fire station,
Uh-huh.
I just gotta ask. Okay,
Yeah.
that's it, I'm good.
All right, anything else? Okay, so, we will make a motion, or I will look for a motion, with the, edit of the amount at $70,000.
Can I just, we're gonna go back and clarify our motion to state that we're awarding the contract for $100,000, and the contingency is the $40,000. You've made that clear, I think, in your.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, ours is just, I'm simplifying it as the amount, so, we will, that will be, in the language, it will be awarding the contract, and then our side of it. So what I'm voting on is just the ability to give the chief, the authorization to spend the 70 from our side.
And we're gonna outline that as 50 and 20, correct?
Correct.
So that'll be documented
Yes.
as 50 and
Yes.
20.
Yeah, we can,
Okay.
Kathleen, you got that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the notification, should we approach the contingency?
Gotcha, and then I should open this to public comment. Is there any public that has comments on the fire district side of the departmental matter? Can you guys check and see if there's?
Regina, if you could, please help us open up public comment for the fire district side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there's any public comments at this time regarding the fire department's motion, excuse me, I'm sorry, was there a motion made?
There was not a motion, we're just at, public comment on it.
Gotcha, thank you. So at this time, please raise your hand if you have a comment to make. And I do not see any public comments.
Okay, very good. So, to clarify, this is, us authorizing the chief to enter in with contract with, Dewberry, the city of Placerville, for a total amount of $140,000. We're taking half of that. So $50,000 will be our base, and then 20 for the contingency. That's what the, our motion is supporting. So do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, need a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll take a roll call, please, Kathleen.
Mm-hmm. Director Kaiserman.
Aye.
Director Swarbrick.
Aye.
Director Gilchrist.
Aye.
Director Harper.
Aye.
Very good. Motion passes. Thank you very much. What's us? That's our only item.
All right, in our motion, we might have done something slightly inconsistent with what our intention was, and so I'm gonna have Cleve explain, where we're at, okay?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we should have clarified that. Actually, the motion should be to approve the authorize to negotiate the professional service agreement with an amount not to exceed $100,000, and then the contingency of $40,000, which our share will be $20,000 of that. The remainder of that was the same. So we just want to make sure that that's the understanding. So if, Vice Mayor Tater, if you're willing to amend your motion accordingly, we will rescind the other one and then have a second and take that vote.
I will amend my motion as stated.
And I'll amend my second as stated.
All right, thank you. And Ms. O'Connell, if we can get a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Borelli,
Aye.
Councilmember No,
Aye.
Councilmember Zaragoza,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Taylor,
Aye.
Mayor Thomas.
Aye. All right, thank you very much, everybody. And from the city's side, the next thing on our agenda is to adjourn this meeting. The city's next meeting will be April 13th closed session will be at 4:30 p.m. And I would like to note, although not a lot of people are listening on this meeting, it is a beginning of our next meeting for 5 p.m. start time, which is a new start time from us, a departure from our 6 o'clock start time. And with that, I adjourn the city council meeting, and I turn the meeting over to Chairman Schwarber.
Thank you. We're in the same boat, so I will look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye, very good, thank you. And our next meeting is April 15th. Closed session at 1, is it closed session at noon? Okay, well, yeah, we'll update it, put that on the website.
So we have to touch base with them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.